Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is Sunday, the 19th day of November 2023. I'm going to be reading from a particular book by Alvin Kuhn, Kuhn, who was a philosopher back in the 1900s. And the title of this particular piece I'm going to be reading is going to be called The Tree of Knowledge. And so I hope that all are well out there. I wanted just to share this particular book. It's come to my attention that this guy was a great philosopher, very few people know about. And so I want to read some of the information he has here for you guys. So let's get into the reading here. Again, the title is The Tree of Knowledge. The story of creation in Genesis contains the item that represents mankind as having been condemned to eternal death as a consequence of our first parents' disobedience to God. That is his command, not to eat of the fruit of the tree of life and knowledge, which is in the midst of the Garden of Eden. Here, we are confronted with another of those features of the great allegorical dramas of creation that has more than baffled the best efforts of theologians and scholars for 2 millennia. It provides another instant and example of the pitiful manner in which stupid attempt to interpret the Bible literally and factually. Just a second, I want to do something a little bit better here. Easier for me to read. Let's see. Anyway, back to the part here. It provides another instance and example of the pitiful manner in which stupid attempt to interpret the Bible literally and factually has made of scholarship and Bible exegesis a laughing stock and a mockery of sense and sanity for lo. These many centuries of Christian religionism. The story of how allegorically learned savants in the field of religious studies have been misled and duped by the suffrage of another methodology in the writing of sacred scripture in one of the most astounding, indeed well-nigh incredible narratives that unfortunately must now be told. It seems impossible to get across to the minds of clergymen and religious leaders today the simple truth that the ancient Bible writers did not commit themselves as a writer does nowadays to an effort to clarify their meaning in the simplest and most revealing languages. Bibles were not written for this purpose or with this end in view. They can almost be said to have been an attempt to hide rather than disclose the truth they aimed to tell. The purpose was not to broadcast for millions of readers. Parentheses, we must remember that there was no printing in the world then. Parentheses, the truth that was to be expressed, but rather to embalm for the sake of preservation a body of basic truths of life, religion, and philosophy that might be lost if not thus edited. The ancient method was based on a now completely lost and unknown literary practitioner instead of writing treatises in ordinary languages. The aim was to put truth in the form of representations or pictures of it, such as a drama, or allegories, or myths, or parables, or fables, or apologies, numbered graphs, and pictographs on the star cluster in the sky. The picturization of truth was the work of dramatists rather than a plain prose expositories. The elements in man's nature that were the real actor, that is, the actors in the drama of his life, were made personal in the character in the story, just as is said in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White represents the pure divine nature of man, or that is in man, I should say, his soul, and the dwarfs personify the 7 elementary principles that build up his physical body and thus serve her in all mechanical ways. The archaic method was designed to dramatize truth, not to write elaborate dissertations upon it. The Genesis genius which strove to construct the formulas that express the forces and processes of life were dramatic. that is genius, not specifically literary geniuses in the modern sense, when neither writing nor reading was universal. The only practical way to portray ideas was by picturization, that is, them in an allegory, a myth, or a construction that might appear outwardly fantastic to an ignorant person, but would nevertheless subtly intimate to deeper intuition the forms of mighty truth. The accuracy that dictated such a methodology looked in the recognition that for the mind of childhood and a pictorial representation would not only convey for the moment, but impress in perpetually the idea designed to be taught. Much as the housewife puts up in jars the fruits to be preserved, the myth makers and the dramatic poets, and the word poet means a maker, embalmed in myths and drama and a variety of concrete formations, the greater ideographs of recondile wisdom, which they transmitted to early humanity for its guidance throughout evolution. What the individual learns in his childhood serves him throughout life. The memory of childhood is everlasting. I would agree with that very much so. It is the same with humanity in its infancy. The early races were all given the systems of moral and spiritual philosophy, done in myths and drama, so that the graphs of living truth should never be wanting for human instruction and wisdom. The evidence is mountain high that all early peoples were the beneficiaries of essentially the same original body of sage wisdom, and that this primal deposit was the one unitary source of all the world's religions. They are thus proven to have been the one true religion at the start. By recovering that deposit, the greatest need of the world today could readily be met, a universal religion for all mankind. Towards this desirable consummation, the present series should contribute no mean impulse, since its articles will come close to reconstructing in toto the outlines and substances of that mighty truth of old time. Now it's a different area called the Nature's Book of Revelation. The tree of knowledge was one feature of the great formation that depleted truth in graphs and symbols. The sages of antiquity did not have far to go to find not only apt and facetiously, but absolutely inherited types, symbols, and mimeographs of the cosmic laws and principles they had in mind to picture forth. The tools and instruments for truth portrayed lay right at hand or right outside the door. They were present in the multitudinous form in the world of living nature, that is the sky, the earth, the ocean, vegetation, and animal life. The universe daily phenomenon of natural forces supplied the materials able to clarify the speech of truth. These ancient dramatists knew a fact that we are largely ignorant of, that the processes and phenomenon of creative life are everywhere themselves the pictorial dramatization of universe verity. They knew that every tree, bush, insect, worm, beast, every tumbling rip upon the hillside, every cloud, snowflake, mist, and rainfall was each in its way a visible delineation of cosmic principle. For these processes and creations were themselves the outward visible manifestation of the soul of the universe that was working to give itself concrete expression in myriads of varied forms. They were themselves truth come alive in the actual world. They were universal spirits idea. They were now crystallized in material form in the outer world. They were gods, archetype ideas, concrete in atomic matter, as a architect idea becomes substantialized in brick, mortar, wood, stone, and iron. And precisely so, God, the great architect, first formed in his cosmic mind the shape of things to come in his purpose, new creation. And it was over their idea pattern that he later formed the physical universe. In our banal ignorance today, we derive the idealists. But unless the individual is at all times striving to build his life in conformity with the patterns of a noble idea, he will get nowhere, except possibly to that born of all aimless drifting or to the asylum over the hill. Psychology tells us now in tones we dare not disregard that minds break down because of their want of aim, purpose, and meaning in the struggle of life. Bizarre and almost ridiculous as it sounds in the ears of modern people, it can be said truly that philosophy is and must ever be man's true savior. Correct. No doubt about that. Philosophy is the truth. But the sublimeless truths and ideas are pictured to us ubiquitously in the commonest things in nature. Possibly the commonest thing in the world are trees. Just because this object is so common, it must be presumed to embody universal idealization in truest form. It does so indeed. When nature tells a story, it cannot be false. It cannot lead the mind astray. Nature can tell nothing but the truth, because it is truth itself come to view in the actual world. Philosophers have argued for ages whether the actual things such as trees, rocks, streams, and or even are real things, or only the appearance of real things. The whole visible world of things may be an illusion of man's mind, they contend. The obvious truth is that these things are indeed the appearance of real things, for they have emerged from the invisible world of noumenion, our divine thought, and make their appearance in the outer world of actuality. They were not, however, mere appearances in the sense of being an unreal semblance or ghost or shadow of reality, as so generally been the way of describing them. They were the forms of reality itself, arrived at actualization in our world. Philosophy needs to make this vital correction in its thinking. Anything that is must be real. The philosophical dispute over reality or illusion is only a matter of relativity, contingent upon the level of consciousness that is present to evaluate reality. Anything is real to that level of consciousness that can canonize it, but real for that level and not for other levels. A radio wave at 800 is a real for the receiving instrument set to catch that frequency. When he's talking about 800, he's talking about what we call 800 kilohertz or on the AM band. It's not real for a different set of the dial. Man and the philosophers had better settle this question of reality on the basis of naive acceptance that our experience here is real. This world is real, terribly real for us. It may not be real for cherubims and seraphims, but that should not mislead us, as it has done some misguided spiritual religious this in our own day and all past days into thinking we can treat the world as unreal. Along that ideological path lie the whitening bones of many a wrecked personality, philosophically and psychologically speaking. Next section is called the branching tree of life. The tree as symbol tells the story of life with marvelous completeness and vivid expediency. In its shape and configuration, it is almost a picture itself of the structure of the cosmic creative plan, and it is a true picture of man's ideological conception of the form and modus of life manifestation. If one were to try to diagram the processes of creation, one's pencil would almost find itself tracing a figure that would much resemble a tree. Why? Because one would have to draw a heavy line out from a plane, a rootish or origin like the ground, representing the one first and undifferential stream of creative energy, and then branch it out into the two streams and again divide these and their branches and prejudices into ever multiplying separation and division. But that is precisely how the creative impulses emerge from its basal center and branches out into numberless arms and lines of force to permeate at last the whole area of the universe it is to create. The tree and the river were the two most apt and frequently used symbols of the outflow of living energy in creation. The one so vividly depicted the imagination of the life stream from one undivided source and the subsequently dividing and branching, thus typifying the imaginative or involuntary direction of life outward as the beginning of a creative period. The other equally graphical symbolized the return of evolutionary direction from the many terminal streamlets back into the one main channel and the universal ocean. For the tree emanates from the ground as one shoot to divide later into many. The stream begins from multitudinous rills and springs and ends by reuniting them all in the common sea. When typological geniuses wishes to show that the two forces of life, the outgoing and the returning, conjoin and intermingle their energies in the worlds of manifestation, as they do in man's spirit and in his body. They represent the two as working together. Speaking of the righteous man, the beautiful language of the Bible says, he shall be like a tree planted by the river of water. Quote, the Solomon seal, or interlaced double triangle of esoteric symbolism, is a monogram of this interrelational, as the one triangle points downward, the other upward. This is my point. Simply is many do not understand the symbol that is actually on the flag of Israel. You see, it's far deeper. You see, I don't know why they chose to, but anyway, I'm just saying simply that's a symbol that basically points downward and the other upward. The downward direction represents the descent of soul into matter. The upward typifies the return back to infinite spiritual source. That's what the symbol means, folks. The Nordic mythology, however, pictured the two directions by portraying the great tree of life, and I know how to pronounce this, folks. This is Yggdrasil, as both rooted in earth, reaching up to heaven, and also rooted in heaven, extending the arms downward to earth. Evolution brings life downward and branching out towards and upon earth. Evolution takes it back to the empyrean, that is, the band, and less visible, often trees exemplify both directions. Any tree goes down to earth as seed or shoot and returns to heaven as a developing body. Thus, the tree, along with the stream, was employed by the ancient mythologists of divine truth as the symbol of first the distribution and then the reuniting of the living rivers of creative power that, like the four in Genesis, issue forth from the being of God and return to him. The magnificent Greek esoteric philosophy, the suggested revival, which can be the answer to the world's great cry for humanitarian culture today, represents the gods, who are the long arms and agents of God's own working energy as being the distributors of divinity. No phrase could be more enlightened for our dull powers of comprehension. Jesus said, quote, I came to send fire over the earth. And he later illustrated his meaning by breaking a loaf of bread into pieces and distributing one to each of his disciples, declaring that he was breaking his body into fragments so that a piece might be distributed to each. Again, he exemplified his division in multiplying the loaves and fishes to feed the in-hunger multitude. All this was drawn to illustrate the great and forgotten principle of the ancient divine theology, that the rays and streams of creative force that flow forth from the heart of God issue first at one undivided stream, then break and divide endlessly to reach and supply every nook and cranny of being in the universe. The Greeks called these streams of formative power called rivers of vivification. They start out from heavens as one undifferentiated current and reach the perpetual of creation in countless branchlets. Then, having gone out and done their work of watering all the face of the ground, they precisely like the capillaries of our own blood system, turn back from the numbness and springs and begin to merge the many into fewer, and finally end in the one from which they emanated. You see, if that does not picture to the mind even of the dullest of the methodology and processes of God's creative work, it is hard to conceive how we can be taught obviously true. It is interesting to learn the particular trees which the sages chose as typical of creative mode. The northern nations used the ash and the pine, the latter because of its thrilling suggestion of the soul's mortality by its remaining evergreen in winter. That is the period of death. The Druids, as well as the Greeks, used the oak. Mediterranean and Eastern religions use various ones such as the palm, the olive, the banyan, the pine, the tamarisk, or tamarin, or tamarack, the fig, the voti, and Jupiter, cypress, cedar, ilex, persea, locust, or acacia, the sacred tree of masonry, and the fig under the name of sycamore. Macy called it the sycamore-fig. Quote, Revelation speaks of two witnesses whom it called the two olive trees. The Egyptian texts speak of the two divine sycamore trees of heaven and earth, a most revealing nomenclature indeed, since the description enables us at last to know what these two witnesses of the two trees in reality connote. They are now clearly seen to be the two streams of living power, the one emanating from heaven, the other rising up from earth, whose correlated work carries life through each of its great cycles. The one witness is the stream of evolution flowing forth, the other the stream of evolution flowing back, carrying its gains with it. The mysterious seal meaning of many a text in the Bible has had to wait these 2,000 years for the discovery of the Rosetta Stone back in 1796 to supply the key to the lost interpretation. Egypt will redeem a decadent Christianity and its baffling Bible. The time for Christian scorning of paganism is past. Quote, the next section is called That Forbidden Fruit. There is now to be sought the solution of the perplexing and dialectical problem involved in the conventional, time-honored, and orthodox, but not rationally intelligible, theological propositions based on the Genesis verses which seem to declare that man was forbidden by divine command to eat the fruit of the tree of life and knowledge. Language is incompetent to convey any adequate realization of the damaging stultification of wholesome common sense which the utterly bungled and garbed distortion of the purport of the supposed divine ordinance had inflicted upon Western mankind over many centuries. The forbidden fruit and man's alleged disobedience to God in the eating of it and the penalty incurred for all of mankind thereby have become vagaries of Frankenstein proportions, charging the general consciousness of the Occidental world with a paralyzing obsession of wonder, doubt, fear, vicarious remorse for all too many ages. The psychological devastation and habit wrought upon sensitive minds indoctrinated from childhood with the baneful conception is past all calculation. Its doleful preeminence in the center of the West structure of theology amply justifies its place in the first three lines of Milton's great epic. Quote, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. Gruesome and blinding have been the fatalistic implications of the theological legend that the eating of the fruit of a tree, in literal sense by our first parents, caused the fall of man and fastened upon the race of their descendants for all the future the penalty of expulsion from a land of paradise and a life of toil, pain, and sorrow upon the earth, with death the inevitable casualty in the end. It has lurked in the murky shadows of the Western subconscious, a threat to happiness, and a rasping brake upon the natural joyous zest for life, Only the robust rebuff to the theologian's imposition by the natural hearted strength of man's instinctive sense of the preciousness of life, in spite of the decading deadening power of mimetic religious misconceptions have reduced to some mild extent the crushing consequences of the falsification. Had the West been disposed to subjective introversion as was the East, the fatal aftermath of his blind addiction to a weird and macabre theology such as that haunting prevalent belief would have been catastrophically beyond all credence. It would have sunk the Occident, that is the Occident speaking of the East, in a morass of morbidity that would have sickened the whole moral psychology. Indeed, to a degree not commonly glimpsed, it has actually done justice in spite of all the West's aggressive objective and extroversion of view. Protagonists of other religions debating with Christianity could well say that Christianity is a religion that had afflicted its devotees with the conviction of universal sin, and that without reference to the sinner's demerit, it has convicted them of sin before they were even born. What the psychological resultants of such a general persuasion and infatuation on the minds of billions of people over the generations since Bethlehem could be. And tragedy has been the modern revelations of the science of psychoanalysis are well prepared to inform us. This science asserts that for every depressing mental influence we have to pay a heavy penalty in the form of inhibitus, neurosis, and pathological and wretchedness grievous to contemplate. The enormity of the psychic bill is beyond estimate. The cultural catastrophe is all the more unaccountable because there are other verses and clear statements in the Bible that virtually contradict or flatly controvert every implication of the divine command its theology has taken it. Reason and philosophy should be themselves have intimately to any thinking mind that God could not in simple, consistent place man in a garden of life and then forbid him to eat the fruits of the living experience. It's asinine. Sorry, that's my word. But it is. Tragic mistake on a worldwide scale could have been averted if human reason had not been subverted by doctrinal exception. With life given and knowledge, the certain fruit of the experience, a modicum of logical thinking could have assured the reason that God alleged command at once convicted him of dialectic inconsistencies. It accused him of both giving man life, correct, and forbidding him to live in it. The same breath. That doesn't make any sense, does it? No, it doesn't. How could it be seen as compatible with itself that God would place man in the world of life, order him to grow and multiply, and then deny him the right to partake of the fruit of his experience, and predominantly of the fruit of that one tree that yields life and knowledge, both inevitably and indispensably to his increase and multiplication? It makes, here's my explanation. It makes God the giver of life and also the taker of life. That's what it does with this crazy theology that you're born in sin. The archery of ancient allegorism caught the world as a low point of its intelligence and mired the interpretive mind in Christianity in the worst sloth of misconception ever to afflict the human fantasy. Our dullness of comprehension and blank stupidity in howling out our great heritage of ancient mysticism have marred and scarred the face of history. But if reason failed to avert the mental catechism, there are things in the Bible which should have counteracted the direful aberrancy. If the eating the fruit of the tree of life is seemingly forbidden in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, it is on the contrary expressing absurdity as man's right in the last chapter of the Bible. The book flatly contradicts in the last chapter what it seems to say in its first one. The 14th verse of his final, that is 22nd chapter of Revelation, runs as follows. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life. and may enter in through the gates into the city. Here's man's right to eat of the tree is enunciated in forthright terms. Likewise, one does not find anything like forbidden in the statements in the Bible that the leaves of the tree shall be for the healing of the nations. Unfortunately, the illuminating powers of such a verse have been dimmed by the ignorance of all that this tree is the same one as that is in the garden. All this sad mental mishap has come from failure to know that the Bible is a beautiful allegory and not weird and eccentric history. There was no Moses. There was no Lot. There was no David. There was no King Solomon, folks. These are stories. Allegory talks of but one tree, for symbols carry but one specific connotation. History would argue that this tree of the healing leaves was another tree. It would even try to locate it somewhere on some mountain or in some valley, as if it had tried to locate the garden itself in the Euphrates Valley. We've never found Solomon's temple, folks, because there was no Solomon's temple. And then again, these are all stories. So they're trying to find the garden, people in the Euphrates Valley. Just in passing, one can mention the sacred tree of Tibetan lore called Mani Korn Bum, or the tree of the 10,000 precepts. It was asserted that on the underside of every leaf was written a golden precept of religious truth. One reason it stood on the temple ground in some locality. That such a figure to cover splendid truth should have led minds into egregious folly is pitiable. As astute mind with a moment for reflection can see that it is a dramatization of symbolization of the very great truth that the forces of life branch out into living expression, and that each factual experience portrays as one leaf on the mighty tree, or this particular tree, unfolds its own moral lesson, or precept for the creature living it. The fantastic literal idea corrupts and diseases the mind. The allegorical reaction of its trees and sanctifies it. Tolstoy, the great Russian in 1911, had a remarkable vision of the Balkans War and the First World War, all of which was accurately fulfilled. One of the features of his vision still to come to reality was that he saw religion saving itself by returning to symbol and allegory. The early learned Christian fathers urged the allegorical interpretation of the scriptures. Later and less learned ones exonerated, and anathematized them. The result of the latter blunder is only too expressively apparent in a million forms of mental delusion and psychological records under our eyes in history past and present. The reconciled elements of the allegory has utterly miscarried and Padius misled the critics' minds of religious for these many centuries. The tree of life is the branching stream of living experience, and God sent man into this mundane millennial expressed to partake of its fruits, to the full measure of its capacity. The conception of the forbidden fruit in the gross theological and popular accepted form, it must be said, is close to the most outrageous illusion of human belief ever to snare man's gullible fantasy. The sentence in the last chapter of Revelation completely upsets the idea that first man violated divine law or disobeyed God in the garden. It asserts man's right to eat the tree fruit. Representation and vignettes found in ancient doctrines picture the scene of the temptation in the garden. There is the tree with the woman standing close beside its branches, the serpent reaching out its head from the foliage and whispering to her ear, while she hands a cup of the juice of the fruit of the tree to her husband at her side. It is the allegory done over in vignette. The next section, the juice of the fruit. What the juice of the fruit of the tree signifies is most necessary to understand if one is to discern the full relevance of every item of the symbolism. It is glaringly obvious, and there is no excuse for its having been missed for so long, to the universal detriment of mankind. What is fruit juice? It is the liquid essence which is forced out under physical pressure and contains in it the innermost essence of the fruit's powers of nourishment. This description dominates for us a large segment of the meaning of all experience. It hints volubly at the great fact that all life is constituted of finer essence contained within coarser shells and needing to be expressed, that is, outpressed, parentheses, through the pressure of life's physical circumstances. In the tree, there is the hard exterior, then the fluid sap, and within that, the vital essence. Imagine this in man. There is in his gross outer physical body, within that, the blood, and in that, as we know, the pranic electricity of life. All of this furnishes us with an analogy with experience itself. Externally, our experience consists of physical acts, states, and phenomenon. First, but a step further inward, it consists of conscious reaction to the crude physical contacts. First, sensation, then a step inward, emotion, another step inward, and in the result, a sense and emotion. Thought is generated, and still going inward, there is aroused at last the final spiritual being of the man in assertion of will and purpose, the ultimate response. Now requires a vast quality of outer experience to reach deeply within and deposit its final effects upon the innermost soul, and so to say, squeeze out its spiritual reaction. Just as it takes hundreds of tons of crude coal to produce by distillation an ounce of subliminal power in radium form, so it takes vast quantities of crude physical, sensual, and emotional experience to generate in the depths of being one single dynamic realization, one single flash of more splendid light in the profoundest depths of consciousness. It is a most edifying analogy and a true one. The most subliminal and hence most precious essence of the meaning and the good of man's conscious experience must thus be forced out to realization under pressure of vast amounts of outer sensual experience. Out of this process and phenomenon, the squeezing out of the juice of the fruit of a tree is the perfect analog and outer type. The juice of the fruit of the tree of life and knowledge is therefore to be sensed in a powerful mental way and understood at the ultimate soul reaction or deposit in consciousness from the whole process of mortal existence. Man partakes of this life-giving nectar, this wine of life, just insofar as his experience pressed upon him with sufficient force to draw out from the deepest soul its divinest reactions. And now comes a startling release of lost truth. Impressive and significant enough in itself to cause a fury in religious circles, it is beyond dispute that the cup of this living essence, this sap of the tree of life, this juice of the fruit of the living tree of creation, which the woman offers to the man in Genesis, is the same cup which the Jesus carried in the New Testament in his agonizing cry from the cross, pleased that his Father may let pass from him. After the first shock of its revelation, this statement should not be considered as either so strange or so unlikely. When, sorry, I lost my place here. When another release of forgotten truth and another astonishing announcement of a correct following of symbolism brings up beside it the similar pronouncement, even more revealing that the tree of the creative garden is the same tree as that of which Jesus was crucified. Him who you slew and hanged on the tree is one of the Bible passages which uses the word tree instead of cross. It is not known that there are many old legends of ancient days in which the tradition was kept alive that the cross of Golgotha was cut from the wood of a tree which had been propagated from a branch or a seed or shoot in the tree of paradise. Legend has sometimes preserved truth more securely than written scripture. It is markedly so in this case. When the allegorical symbolic nature of ancient biblical composition is better known, there will be no question that the Christ was crucified on the tree of life. As this tree keeps on unfolding its growth throughout the lengthy cycle, obviously the Christos must be represented as being crucified on its continual fresh propagation from generation to generation. Likewise, Jesus was tempted by Satan, that old serpent of Revelation. And so we have four central items of the same story: the tree, the cup, the serpent, and the temptation, in both Genesis and the New Testament formulations of the archaic typology. These marks of identity between the two sweeps aside all possible chicanery that have been resorted to is whole them apart as separate and different historical episodes. Specification of this identity constitutes a revelation and a revolution of gigantic proportions in all religious symbology. In other words, symbols of theology. It renders obsolete at one stroke a whole vast mass of theological lucubration, heavy and sodden, that has deplorably misconceived and misrepresented the true and luminous meaning of the fabric of theology. The banal rays of a new dawn of light and understanding break above the horizon with this announcement. Next section. The wily serpent. Equally revolutionary in the significance must be seen to be the next point of exegesis, that of the identity of the character of the serpent in the drama, the grand enlightenment which the creation story was designed to give the world has been sadly dimmed by our sheer inability properly to identify the characters enacting the great cosmic scenario. In ecclesiology religion, not a word has been uttered in centuries that would give the remotest intimation as to the true reference of the subtle villain of the creation priest. Still the ignorant gap and their wonder grows as to why God, omnipotent and all-wise, allowed a snake to come in to anoint the first human pair and so quickly seduce them to their and our eternal fall. Common reasoning suggests that it was a bit unfair and inconsiderate of the mighty Almighty Father to throw a giant temptation in the way of our first progenies at the very first moment of their career. One must think that he should have at least have given them time to get their bearings and learn by experience the operations of the divine laws for their guidance before bearing down on them with a stern and grim prohibition, with their eternal destiny dangling on the issue. This guy thought it through. Interesting. Very good. Common credulity and its ignorant seminary toolish has assumed that from all the surface intimidations of the story, the crafty serpent was the arch enemy of God and a fell plotter against his good work. Correctly understood must clear this dramatis persona of both wicked plotting and enemy against the supreme. One of the very first sects of early Christians was that of the Ophites, Ophites, who worshiped the serpent, that is Greek meaning Orphis, Ophis, as their prime symbol. A naive mistaught Christian would from this jump to the conclusion that these Hebrew Christians must have been of the status of savage tribesmen under the horrid delusion that their God was the serpent. But we can see that if even Moses raised up the serpent on the cross in the wilderness, acting assumingly under God's control, then in some fashion or other, this fearsome reptile must have stood as symbol of something on the good side of the meaning. Ordinary familiarity with the serpent symbol of ancient literature, especially of the Uridius snake of the Egyptians, and a wisely study of comparative religion would have obliterated the worldwide and age-old blunder of mistaking the serpent for a hostile element in the work of creation. People have been puzzled After reading the stories of the evil serpent, to hear the divine teacher in the New Testament enjoy upon his followers to be wise as serpents. Popular Christian belief has surely reduced the misrepresentation of great cosmic truth in its own scriptures to a melange in its comprehensive oddities. The graphic and vivid instructive significance of this animal symbol inheres in the suggestive hints and analogs which the creature supplies to thought. Sagacity in olden times, that is, sages in olden times, quickly caught at a quite thoroughgoing analogy between its shape, its characteristics, and life habitudes, and the general form of evolutionary processes themselves. Its length of body, permitting it to coil in general spiral shape around 7 folds, with its head rising at the top of culmination, furnishing a striking picturization of the great creature force itself. Like the serpent, this energy swings every 7 times around its great and lessening cycles and erects its culminating product, which is clearly enough the higher consciousness centered in the head at the topmost point of attainment. The snake lying coiled 7 times around on itself form a circular center hole, which was called by the Greeks the snake hole or the cycle of necessity, that is, kulos. Kulos becomes cycle in English. This was to embolize the inescapable necessary of the soul swinging 7 times through the rounds of elements to gain its evolutionary growth. The serpent then accurately typifies, and its dramatic figure in the allegory represents the great Sali law, that is, the law of evolution, which takes all creature life swinging eternally round the 7 ring cycles of incarnations in lower grades of matter. Without this immersion in matter, depths, and increasing growth occurring, therefore, the soul could not further evolve. The serpent symbolizes, therefore, the wholly beneficial law of life itself. As nearly as we can paraphrase it, is the modern parlance, the serpent is just the natural law. But now, as for the sake of dramatic representation and the accentuation for weak human ideation of the difference in cosmic rank and the opposition of function between the automated natural law of physics, in quotes, as the Greeks called it, and the higher spiritual law of the divine mind, the first being, as with us, God's subconscious activities, and the second, his conscious directing intelligence. The dramatist painted the crawling reptile that carried the symbolism of the lower automation in the colors of comparative evil. The 2 laws, the natural and the spiritual, operating jointly in man's nature, do stand in contrariety, even in a sense in opposition to each other. But thousands of years of futility and folly have been the product of the failure of theological acumen to evaluate this opposition in its true measure and proportion of balanced understanding. The gross misconception to which all ancient civilization of high and abstruse truth has been subjected, and by which it has been mutilated into variable travesty of its true interior sense, has wrought havoc with the original high purpose of the construction. It has mistaken the opposition of relation, position, and function for the opposition of moral and spiritual design and purpose. It has mistaken the opposition of polarity for the opposite of good and evil. Or it has misconceived the opposition as of right and left, level and fulcrum, symmetric and balanced, fingers and thumb, for the opposite of evil to good. It has taken one of the 2 opposing arms of being that uphold the worlds and, abstracting it out in its relation to the whole process, declared it to be evil. All work, including all creative work, is accomplished by the mutual assertion of force against resistance, and a resistance against force. And what folly for philosophers so far to forget themselves as to fall into the error of calling the resistance force evil, because it seems to be blocking the effort of the working force. Both are equally necessary and are therefore equally beneficial and good. They are two halves of the total being. It is their function to balance, to stabilize, and finally to actualize the values their attention brings to birth. You know, I'll give a little, when there's pressure on, you find out what you really are made of. When things are tough, such and such, you find out what life is for. You find out, are you going to be able to rise above that? That's what this is talking about. Is to make you into a better and stronger and a more balanced person. And they are hard. I'm not saying it's easy. And that's my quote here. This is my say. That's not what he says. If one of them failed to stand up to its nature and function, the other would collapse with it immediately. It is the pull and attraction between the two that upholds the universe. Their cooperation is that of function and instrument, purpose and means, and it is required that they take their places at opposite ends of polarity and provide for each other resistance that alone would stabilize their activities at given times and locations in the cosmos. No more in the opposition of matter and spirit evil than it is the opposition of man and woman, darkness and light, heat and cold. Life could not advance to higher ends in the unfoldment if the two ends of the everlasting polarity were not opposed to each other and countervailing against each other. They are opposed to each other, yes, in sheer mode of function, but certainly not opposed in ultimate aim and goodness. See, this is the whole idea. See, this is all that the woman is evil. Oh, she's the bad one. It has nothing to do with that. Oh, she must have been unable to handle the pressure, such and such, da da da. So we have to have man who rules over a woman because she is the one, she's matter, M-A-T-T-E-R. And it has nothing to do with that, folks. Continue on. Reckless misconception of the opposition of polarities has introduced into all religion the most damaging eccentricities of belief and conduct perhaps ever recorded on the weak side of human ideation. That is weak, W-E-A-K. The story is too gruesome and horrifying to recount. It has caused billions of minds to live under the darksome shadow of the presupposition that nature, the world, the flesh, the very body of man is against his soul. The natural functions and desires, the very enjoyment of man's life in the body, are all foul forms of evil. It has led millions in all ages of attempt to crush and mortify the natural bodily side of their lives. Quote, a later work will deal exhaustively with this feature. It is so deeply interwoven into the texture of the present essay in relation to the tree of knowledge that it has to be given cursory introductory treatment. It can be seen that the ability of man's philosophical sagacity to discern rightly the very truth here expounded, and so to balance his life between the two functional pressures of the good and the evil, as these are seen in the common human view, and to realize that ultimately all things, in spite of appearances to the contrary, are working together for his good and are good in themselves, understanding them as the good divided into his bipolar aspects of function and instrument, balancing, not thwarting each other. This ability of man to achieve one's aspect of this balance is an exceptional realization that the opposition of the two is wholly beneficial and salutary. It is itself one of the prime goals of his life. Hence, it is woven into the story in the very name of the tree. The tree of life bears on its outermost branches the ultimate buds and blossoms and fruits of knowledge, which fruits consist of man's final attainment of the genius to know that both good and evil as apparent to lower discrimination become resolved in a higher synthesis of understanding. You see, you're moving up. It works together. And that's why there is duality. You have to have duality. You have to have it in order for you to grow spiritually in all ways. Duality is necessity. It's necessary, I should say. It's a necessity for you to grow. Many people poo-poo that idea. That's baloney. But it takes the whole experience of life in earthly bodies, and the ancients added many such lives to open the eyes of mortals to the perception of the non-reality of of the apparent opposition between good and evil. So it is not until the human pair themselves an expression of the polar duality, the opposition of man and woman, had eaten of the forbidden fruit that the eyes of them were open. But the serpent had expressed to the woman the very essence of the paragraph here with written, that if they ate of the fruit of the tree, then your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Here's the clinching certification that man's defecation, the distinct goal and crowning achievement of his long course of evolution, comes with and through his rising in mind estate to the mountaintop of vision, wherefore he can see good and evil melt together in one transient consubstantiation of beneficence. It benefits you. We'll continue on. The 12 fruits of the tree. Again, the last chapter of the Bible supplements and illustrates the first one. Nothing is more revealing than the second verse. The seer announces that the Spirit has shown him the pure river of the water of life, proceeding out of the throne of God and the Lamb. And in the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, it was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruit, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the trees were for the healing of the nations. Hardly could there be found a more sublime delineation of the graph of man's historical existence and its scheme of unfoldment anywhere in poetic literature. The great stream of creative energy flows forth from the highest or innermost seat of being and nourishing the growth of this tree of constructive organic existence. Man's creative life among the rest, the most luminous item of the depreciation is that the tree grows on either side of the river of water. In this single phase has esoteric penetration prevailed over stupid literalism. Was to be seen the immediate rebuke and denial of all that vast sweep of pious religionism and alleged spiritual philosophy which elevated and worshipped spirit and equally depleted nature, matter, and body. For the tree has and must have its roots firmly grounded in both banks of the stream, the spiritual and the material. Here is truth that mankind sorely needs and never so as now. The fate of religion, philosophy, human culture hangs precariously in the balance until this point is certified in all thinking minds. Genesis does not expressly state that the tree bears 12 manners of fruit, but Revelation does. Again, here is a mighty instruction. Man, it was once known, is to evolve in his entire life course 12 distinct forms of faculties of higher consciousness, to which he will give full function as he becomes the God he is destined to be. This basic knowledge was the ground and origin of all divisions of 12 in the arcane literature and religious symbolism. It is generate for the 12 months of the year, the 12 hours, or twice that is, of the day, the 12 tribes of Israel, or sons of Jacob, the 12 disciples of the Christos, who were shepherds under the sign of Aries, fishermen under that of Pisces, the 12 stone pillars in ancient temples, the 12 lines of the four faces of the great pyramids, and many another 12-fold types of depreciation. Men will be as gods when they shall have perfected those 12 unfolding aspects of divine mind. The putting forth one of 12 fruits each month is further play of the symbolism of the evolutionary process in which each cycle period is thought of as producing its given spiritual product in regular order of growth. Now we go to another section called the healing leaves. I'm going to take a water break here a little bit. The significance of the poetic assertion that the leaves of the tree shall be for the healing of the nations is of transcendent value, and again it has been missed by purblind religionists. Why is it the leaves and not the roots or trunks or branches that are to heal mankind is the point of keen allegorical reference that must be brought out. The instruction for us here lies hidden in the realization that the leaves are periodically and distinctly cyclical manifestations in the life of the tree. They are projected seasonally on the outer body of the perennial and live and die in a regular periodicity. The life of the permanent body of the tree annually pushes out beyond its previous boundaries and builds for itself a new extension of the body through which it can experience a new era of growth. The permanent soul of being must be put itself forth to exercise a new embodiment constantly and recurringly. The soul of the tree has its seasonal experience in this transient vehicle, that is, produces its fruit and withdraws at the cycle's end, appropriating the products of its annual activity in the leaf, but leaving the outer body of that leaf to wither and die off in the winds of autumn. In the face of this eternal, repeated demonstration of life's processes, it is futile for Stoic ignorance to deny any longer the methodology by which it carries the gains of one cycle over to use as capital in endlessly following cycles. It speaks in unquestionably tones affirmation of the universal ancient and early Christian thesis that spirit reincarnates in material bodies over and over till the day of its perfection in every cycle range of teaching power. The church violently threw out the doctrine in the 6th century as the Second Council of Constantinople, but it harbored it until that time. It would be well if this prominent fact of church history were not so Duducius concealed. The successive incarnation of units of spiritual mind, which are the sons of God, individualized seed fragments of God's own consciousness in bodies of physical matter on a given planet, are indeed the leaves put forth by the tree of life season after season, and these incarnations and experience they give the souls undergoing them shall truly enough be for the healing of the nations. For only through repeated embodiment of such mundane vessels of flesh can the soul from God gain that long course of instruction and enlightenment that will eventually, through the opening of his eyes to truth, heal it of all the imperfections that limit and distress it because of the ignorance that they start. The tree is the tree of knowledge, and its 12 fruits are thus 12 segments of complete divine understanding and mastery of life's deepest secrets. With such perfected wisdom with the man of the universe, with the men of the nations of mankind heal their infirmities and enfold their lives in beauty and happiness. How insensibly the book of Proverbs drives home the preciousness of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, asserting that they surpass in value all that the heart can desire. And specifically, it says that they shall be health to the man possessing them. Only through continual incarnation can the soul rise to the point of knowledge which will enable it to free itself from all its from all its ills. The annual round of living activities of the tree form a perfect analogy of the similar activities of the tree of life in every higher and vaster sphere of being in the universe. We have lost the principle of the great illuminating science of analogy. The tree teaches us irrefutably and inescapably that a permanent and eternal part of life, namely the soul of a divine consciousness, periodically puts forth into the manifestation an arm of its power, which expresses itself in a cycle of birth, growth, maturity, decay, and death. Appropriates to itself the increment of growth gained thereby, and withdraws into the invisible world of spiritual being at the end. If then man is made in the image and likeness of this cosmic pattern, it must be true beyond debate that a permanent and eternal part of him, his immortal soul, periodically puts forth a ray of its own power in order to relate itself to the forces at play in the material world, appropriates it the harvest of many such repeated experiences, and thus increases its own expansion into infinite divinity and glory of conscious being. The tree settles this debate beyond cavit. Why was man tempted? You may ask. It is necessary next to extract from the allegory the hidden meaning of the puzzling item of the temptation of the woman, or the women, it should be woman, I guess, by the serpent, and of the man by the woman. This temptation has been another of the numberless characterizations designed to portray or reconcile truth that have caught the dull, alert intellect of the West in the toils of this cryptic suffrage. People of incapacity for reflection have wondered without end why God, just and fair in his judgments, that is, quote unquote, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether, would permit a wicked adversary such as the theological Satan, that old serpent, to connive and torment his most righteous servant Job. And here in Genesis, to scheme subtly to defeat God's own creative work in the formation of mankind. It has all come from the failure of philosophical recruitment to catch the sane significance of the item of the opposition of polarities analyzed in an earlier paragraph. Due to this failure of insight, there has been, quote unquote, misread into the term temptation, a low human connotation of the word which leaves the mind miles away from its intended significance. To tempt is to present to the intended victim or subject a lure or prospect of appealing or desirable nature with the hope that he may bite on it and thus fall into the designated trap set by the Templar. Common view, at any rate, has largely taken this form of understanding. A very minute element of this reference perhaps does inhere in the evolutionary situation which the Bible glip is dealing with, but only in the most playful form. The real meaning concerns picturing cosmic procedure, all of which is intrinsically normal and good. The word itself, temptation, comes either from the Latin tento, meaning to try or to test, to experiment with, or from tempto, to tempt. It is likely that both these forms are but variants of the one original root. In the first instance, that is, if from tempto, T-E-N-T-O, it would carry the meaning of to give trial to try out, to actually practice, to test, or to put the test or trial. In this reference, it would indicate that the temptation to which God subjects all his creatures, who are, be it remembered, the cells or members of his own body, is nothing more nor less than his sending them out into the incarnated life. You see, he's planting them in his gardens, and that they may have right to the tree of life and grow by developing their latest capacities and powers through overcoming their opposition of inert matter in their duality of life. In the book of Revelations, the 7 great rewards are promised to him that overcome it, to grow to higher beauty. Spirit must overcome the inertia of matter. Its aeonic victory can be gained only as an outcome in the incarnational efforts. Continue until the goal is attained. So God's sons must continuously reincarnate. I'll say that again. So God's sons, which all of us are God's sons, must continually reincarnate. This is subject them to the tension that prevails between them and the force of matter. And this is the ordeal, the trial, the testing, the temptation, as it might better be named. It has nothing to do with the theological word meaning sin or disobedience whatsoever. It is God's pathway for all his children, the natural benefit course of his plan for their evolution. It is for you to grow up, folks. is for you to expand, to find out who you really are. If, on the other hand, the word derives from tempto, T-E-M-P-T-O, it stands related to an even more significant background of meaning. It would be revealed as once, as being connected with the Latin word tempus, T-E-M-P-U-S, meaning time. To tempt man would then be to bring his soul down from the realms of spirit, which we all are from spirit, where all religions have asserted that consciousness lies above the human appreciation of time, where time exists not, and throw it under the illusion of the time sense. To tempt man would be to subject him to the time consciousness. This type of consciousness comes through the reduction of higher mind to a lower tempo of vibration as it falls under the limitation of brain activity. And it would be hard to pick a truer psychological definition of the situation confronting the soul in the Genesis recital than this one here depleted. It is exactly what happens in the genesis of humanity and incarnation does especially subject the soul to a reduction to the time and sense. So the temptation is just another blip for the descent of the soul into the mundane life with the hidden accentuation on the sad diminution of the soul's power under the dominance of the flesh. It is in the Greek philosophy of esotericism that one finds the rationalization of the soul's loss of divinity in exchange for human powers of consciousness so thoroughly eliminated. It in reality constitutes the loss of paradise. What is paradise but a higher dimension of consciousness? Question. The temptation then resolves back into the same thing that is otherwise indicated as the meaning of all those other forms of the experience of the Son of God on earth. His baptism, his crucifixion, his transfiguration, all these refer to but one thing, that is the incarnation. All are but factuals of the career of the divine fragment of soul when imprisoned in mortal body, or just that career viewed from the various angles of its involvement. Take another break for some water. If you have ever asked the question why the temptation came first from the serpent to the woman and from her to the man? Have you ever asked that question? Why? Why did the serpent attack the woman? Why did it attack the man? Yet this procedure points to most significant understanding. The point is that the cyclical law tempts woman first because woman typifies matter, M-A-T-T-E-R. The word matter is identical with the Latin word for mother, or mater, M-A-T-E-R, the eternal mother of all life. And matter is the first element visible projected on the scene of creation. Matter, the mother, the woman, is the embodiment of the first grades of life and consciousness in a cynical ground, and is therefore first on the scene. Matter must be produced and brought to organic form so as to generate the highly complex mechanism of brain and nervous system that is to be consciousness and spirit. The male principle can be brought to birth and function. The mother must have grown to adulthood in the vast cycle of time before she can produce her Christly offspring of divine mind. So the cynical law, the old serpent, involves women or woman in its toils first. It tempts her in the lighter sense of the word because it offers to every atom in her body an infinite career of growth and expansion to the eventual crowning goal of self-consciousness. So the woman takes and eats first. Then matter produces the element of soul as its son, and having its old age of evolutionary cycle prepared the organic bodies capable of resting the high vibrations of a soul consciousness. It invites man. That is, man is the Sanskrit word meaning to think. The first thinker, to unite with his partaking of the living experience and eating its glorious fruits. This all comports more harmonious with the Bible statement already canvassed that God formed man from the atomic dust, rendered as the dust of the ground, which in effect says that God formed man from atomic matter, the woman. Next section. The fruit leads man to death. Now, since the Bible itself contradicts the popular conception as to the prohibition enjoined on man against eating of the tree of life, the great wonder arises to how such a apparent, direct, and positive injunction found its way into the sacred text. This does not yield so readily to the clear elucidation, yet the thesis here presents for the first time does provide the necessity elements of its explanation, and this again constitutes a epic disclosure. It must be seen through the eyes of dramatism. Being a drama, these old formations are dramatic allegories. The apparent, but by no means actual prohibition falls in because of the faulty way of transcribing the construction of the original story. It is possible the key is already in our hands now to reconstruct the Genesis dialogue so as to see what a fuller account would have brought out in clearer focus. What then has been taken to be God's interdiction of man's doing the very thing he was sent here to do must be reformulated so as to bring out what it was intended to convey, or more likely to conceal. The gifts of the speech made by Kyrios ho Theos, that is the Lord, the God, in which the fatal command was given, might be restated somewhat as follows. Here, Adam the man, I have created you and placed you in the wonderful garden of life and consciousness. All the fruits of the many trees are a thrilling experience you may eat, but the central and greatest tree of all is the tree of life and knowledge. This you will desire to eat, but I must make it clear to you, if you desire to partake of the fruit of the wondrous tree, you must suffer death. Now, the entire clarification of the exegesis rests upon our correct understanding of one word, death, and its verb to die. One of the later numbers of this series will deal with the lost theological meanings of these words. It has been already pronounced the most significant single revelation in religious study in modern times. Briefly put here, in anticipation of the fuller development in the later work, it may be stated the Bible writers employed the words in that cryptical sense in which it was used in the Greek religious philosophy. There we find death used to denote the reduced state of the soul's life when it descends into the earthly body and becomes torpid and inert under the slower pulse of life energies in the material worlds. Paul clearly states that the soul came under bondage to the law of sin and death, which is in our members when in incarnation. So when we're in incarnation, that's what happens. In short, ancient wisdom conceived and called the soul's life and mortal body its death, or on the cross, a matter. Here then is our key to man's death coming with his fall in Genesis. Light shines at last. God laid down to his creatures the law of being, that under the irrevocable and inexorable cycle of necessity, if they wish to partake of all the largeness of his bounty in conscious life, they must know that it involved their descent into the valley of the shadow of death. It is if he has said, if you wish to gain all the wondrous life, you must first lose it, down in cynical death in earthly body. To gain the distant heights of being, you will have to cross the low valleys where the soul lies long buried in its earthly tomb. You will have to cross the blood-red sea of life in physical bodies, but I will be with you, and the waves shall not overcome you, or overwhelm you, I should say. One need not go outside the latter text of the Bible story itself to find the essential confirmation of the correction of this reading. God issues his command, now better seen as a dramatized manual of instruction for his creatures, or man, and then the serpent. The law has its rejoinder, says it to the woman, and through her to the man. God has told you only that if you eat of the fruit of the tree of life and knowledge, you will surely die, D-I-E. Now I must add that this in its reality not the death you think it is. You see, hear me further. I will give you the comforting assurance that if you eat of this fruit, you shall not die in its final sense. Nay, more, if you eat of this fruit, you shall from the eating thereof become as gods, knowing good and evil. For your eating will open your eyes to see all life with the understanding of gods. And the revealing utterance of the serpent in his statement to Eve that God doth know, that the eating will make you as one of Elohim, who knows the eventual beneficiaries of the tension between good and evil. Unless this rendition is accepted, exegesis faces the insoluble problem of reconciling a vast logical inconsistency, if not the most eccentric and irrational conduct on the part of omniscient deity. If, as the serpent states, God knew that life for man would end in elevation among the gods, which very goal he has set for man, on what logical and consistent grounds could he have forbidden the creature the right to eat? Any other answer but the one here suggests argues undeniably whimsically, that is, and caprice on the part of the all-just creator. It must be seen that the entire Orthodox Christian interpretation does thus rest on the accrediting God with gross and weird inconsistencies. God cannot offer man life and knowledge and then be reasonably in forbidding him to take them. That makes God a devil, folks. A liar. That's what that would say. That's what it means. If you take it literal, you're saying simply is that God in his goodness, such and such, suddenly becomes a liar. He's a devil. He's deceived you. And that's a lie. Here has been the huge stumbling block in all Christian theology over the centuries. The plain common sense of thinking people detects this flaw and wonders, is it questionable whether the allegory of the forbidden fruit has been clearly seen as a rational item by a single mind in Christendom? It has contributed its obscuration, in other words, being obscured, to 100 similar illogicalities to defeat the high good that religion and sacred scriptures could have rendered. And in this time, such things were corrected. Then in the 22nd verse of the 3rd chapter of Genesis, the truth comes out. For there the drama has God saying, behold, a man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever, therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. All hinges on the conjunction adjective, that is the adverb lest, L-E-S-T. It must be a sound argument that contends there may have been either deliberate tampering with the original text, as to our disgust, we learn there has been all through religious history, or equally deliberate, clever covering of the real sense by dramatic subtlety, which could be the more likely here. We can conceive the dramatist as desiring to veil the open sense by a playful ruse, much as a rich, indulgent father, head of a great business concern, would offer his son full participation in the enterprise. Yet at the start of the son's serious career, he would say to him, you are to be the one of us in the management, but lest you try to take hold of your prerogatives before you have mastered all the details of the business to know the right from the wrong courses of procedure, I must send you out into the factory to learn it all from the bottom up. This sums up almost incontestably the gist of the logic of the situation. Let the argumentation chips fall where they may. And it does bring out rationally light, which all previous exegesis has left the matter shrouded in Styrenian darkness. It may be the final basis of all sanity in our religious psychology to understand that even God cannot give unto his beloved children the bliss and blessedness of divine life without imposing on them the individual condition that they earn their right to it by developing the capability for it in the time-tempting mill of evolution. That is correct. There's no other way. It's just common sense. That's just logic, folks. In order for your son, you had a son, you're a father, you do not give him the You do not give him the reins of the business at the top. You never would do that. It's foolishness because he has no idea what he's doing. He must go and start at the bottom and move up. That's the way it works, folks. It's the same way in life. If you want to be someone, you go study, say you want to be a lawyer. You just don't just show up in a courtroom and say, I want to be a lawyer. It doesn't work that way. Same with a doctor. You got to go to school. You got to practice. You see, as a doctor, you got to learn how to do certain things, procedures. After you've gone so many years, you then go into what I call a training period at a hospital. I've known known doctors to be that they would have to go somewhere else to practice that at a hospital or somewhere of that nature to get their hands wet in order to understand what they're supposed to be doing. Yes, they know some of the procedures, yes, but the point simply is they must be in that situation to grow, period. It doesn't work any other way. If you aspire to be someone great in the future, such and such, you must go to school, you must study, and you must practice, and you must give most of your life to that at first in order to get the fruits of it. There's no other way. No father would give the reins of a son who has never even practiced it and say, "Here, son, we've got $100 million plant here, and you here you go. Here's this shot. I'll see you later. Have a good day." The son would have no idea what he's doing and probably would destroy the company in no time. That's why he has to start at the bottom. He has to understand where the guy at the bottom. But that's not even taught anymore today, even too. Anyway, got off the tangent here. But I'm just trying to explain to you, this is logical. This makes sense. You don't give someone who's naive, or son, who knows nothing of what he's doing. It's just foolishness. And now, as a climatic denouncement to the whole tragic muddle of centuries, comes the astonishing disclosure that all the while the confusion and misunderstanding prevailed, the words of the Bible text itself are found to have clearly stated that the woman was not gullibly victimized by a trap set by the wily serpent at all, that she made her choice to eat of the tree in full knowledge and realization of consequences. Understand that she was making the holy, right, and true choice in the situation. The old traditional senses of the temptation as disobedience to God's command and errant waywardness is directly shattered to bits by the actual wording of the story. For after the serpent had amplified the Lord's brief assertion that the eating would bring the death of incarnation existence, the narrative uses language which negates utterly the assumption that the woman was lured unwillingly into a trap. It says that when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and that the tree to be desired made one wise, she took of the fruit thereof. Here is no hint of deception and dupery, but deliberately intelligent choice, based on her own knowledge and observation. She acted on what she saw. She saw that the eating would eventually, in giving her and her husband wisdom, from every point of view, it was overwhelmingly desirable. It meant a plunge into the waters of death and a long struggle with the serpent forces. But not all of this was to be compared with that glory which should be its outcome. For the death on the cross of matter would be temporary, while the duration of the trial would be life and light everlasting. No other choice was possible to a mind that saw eventualities, the risks, and its enchanting rewards. Next section. From innocence to knowledge. Of the many trees denominated by ancient fancy as trees of life, none was more generally prominent than the sycamore-fig. Particularly in Egyptian symbology was it outstanding at the tree of life, as the branches of the living tree that spread out their arms to erect the structure of the life express clothe themselves with leaves each season, I should say. There is a reference to life clothing itself with fig leaves. Do you remember that in the creation narrative? I do. Adam and Eve, finding themselves divested of their radiant spiritual garments, hastily sewed together leaves of the fig tree to form aprons which to cover their own nakedness. The obvious, albeit esoteric, reference is, of course, not to natural clothing, but to the outer physical body with the nucleus of spiritual soul puts on to give its contact with the lower planes. The tree itself, the broad visualization of life clothing itself in material body. You see how they twisted this? These considerations puts us directly on the track of an explanation for the strange episodes of Jesus striving to curse the unfruitful fig tree in the New Testament. The tree is to bear the 12 manner of fruits on its branches, as the one noted by Christ had not borne its fruit. The dramatist makes a point of representing the failure as bringing the natural order under the curse of the divine Son. The Gnostic Christian literature laid great stress upon the failure of Mother Nature to bring forth the sons of God. Awaiting the coming of the Christ Aeon, A-E-O-N, going so far as to denominate her efforts the great abortion. Of all the deeper senses, the episode of the Christ figure cursing the fig tree is an analog thrown out in somewhat lighter vein to dramatists. But there is a deep reverence in the true name sycamore. The SYC is root, is most interesting according to Macy. It is derived from the same Greek root, which gives the Greek word for soul or psyche. It is therefore the tree of soul, the tree which incarnates and typifies the life of soul. It can be noted in passing also that the symbolic tree of masonry, the locus acacia, is another typical representation of the tree of Eden, for it is the Greek akaki, meaning innocent, harmlessness. The Edenian tree has often been called the tree of innocence, indicating the condition of life in the pristine purity before its fall into matter, death, and generation. So matter itself, you see, that's death. But they didn't use the word matter. They used the word death. And with the people who were doing these scriptures chose to use the word death, the connotation was simply people thinking physical death. The tree is prolific in fruit it bears for man's enlightenment merely through its analogical intimations. Aspect of these will be limited in succeeding essays. They are central in the work of interpretation, but one feature of analogy must be presented here. The tree bears its fruit through the intercourse of male and female organs out on the extremity of its numberless branches. So does the tree of life and knowledge. The creative strains permeates the worlds of matter as far as their initial impulses will carry them. They come to a standstill on the outermost realm of the movement. There they form a liaison with matter. They unite their energies with the powers latent there in the atom and impregnate these physical powers with the germs of mind. They give the initial impulse and direction to the evolutionary drive. In actual fact, life reaches the preparia of the creative spirit when it impulses have planted its seeds in the root soil of matter. Where the seeds are implanted, growth naturally begins. A way out, then, on the farthest boundaries of the reach, the tree of life bears its fruit. Here, male and female potentiality comes to full and separate embodiments, and through mutual attraction, unite their father and mother capabilities for the generation of new life. There is an impressionable reminder of all this in the allegory of gestation of the twin Jacob and Esau in the womb of their mother Rebekah. Theological dullness has been slow to catch the significance of the many pairs of twins or brothers, sometimes sisters, introduced in sacred literature the world over and plentiful in the Bible. There are even found in the astrological symbolism in the Gemini pair of the zodiac. They represent, it cannot be otherwise, the two notes or poles of creative force, spirit and matter, or male and female creative potentiality, even when both are of one sex. These two forces are released or separated off from the primal unity at the dawn of the cycle and swing apart in opposition so as to balance the universe between them. Hence, they are shown as fighting, the one generally slaying the other, as in the Cain and Abel instance. In the Egyptian allegories, they continue to slay each other in turn over and over again. Here's the final proof that the slaying is only figurative, on the descent or evolution of spirit in the matter. Matter is said to slay spirit. On the evolutionary turn, spirit overcomes matter. In the Jacob Esau birth narrative, that is in Genesis chapter 25-23, the common features of the cosmic allegory are well limned. The two children struggle together within her. And God explains the two nations are in thy womb, and two matters of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. The one, of course, is the material nature, the other is the divine spiritual principle. In man's constitution, the Christos. The elder is Mother Nature, that is matter, the first old mother of the Egyptian depreciation. She is first on the scene of creation and is grown old before she gives birth to her son. The Logos and its ray, the Christos, and nature serves the younger power of mind, which indeed born out of her womb. In the New Testament, there is suggests a little allegory in which the tree is used to bring out one tiny aspect of significance. We have it in the word of what we call Massachusetts Bay Psalm book. That is Zacchaeus, he did climb a tree, the Lord to see. The story represents Zacchaeus as so eager to see the Christ as he came by that to get above the press of the milling throng, he climbed into the tree. The moral here is both obvious and charming. If one would see the Christos amid the press and throng of worldly interest, one must climb pretty far up in the branches of the tree of evolving life, where the vision is not obstructed by the dense pressure of lower abstractions. The allegory is ever a sublimer teacher than history. So he got up higher in the tree in order to see truth. Your higher mind, you see. The study of tree embolism would not be complete without touching on the great religious tradition of the golden burr. The tree of life was said poetically to bear on its topmost branch a burl of gold. The tree planted in the primordial garden with its roots in heaven, its branches on earth, was in the course of the cycle to culminate in the production of a branch of shining glory. One of the names given to the Christ in the Bible in previous literature was the branch. Remember, indeed, the Hebrew word for branch is Nazer, Natzer, which is believed to be the basis of the word Nazarene or Nazareth. The tree of evolution is to end in the generation of the Christ nature in man. And when the Christ is generated, the man and transfigured until his face shines like the sun, and his garments becomes white as the light. Oddly enough, the words for light and for gold in the ancient books are practically identical throughout. Spirit is the great golden light of divine radiancy. It is the refuge, or what we call or, A-U-R, A-R, or, O-R, U-R, E-D-R of the various languages. When man's evolution terminates in the flowering out at the summit of the golden light of spiritual radiance, then indeed it has put forth its golden burl. It is no wonder then that legend truly has it that the tree on which the Christ died for man's redemption is a branch or shoot or the wood of the tree of life and knowledge in the eternal garden of paradise. We are the fruit bearers on its earthly branches, and glory will be ours if happily we shall produce our topmost burl of golden light. The tree has now contributed generously of its amazing symbolic life to our deeper understanding of hidden truth. Its trunks, its branches, its leaves, its roots, and fruit have carried home to reflective thought the priceless instruction that it illuminates, but it is a reflection that has come to few minds, that the fruit is as one and the same time both the end product of the cycle's growth and the beginning seed of a following cycle. In this startling realization of nature's marvels of economic lies buried the germ of perhaps the greatest of all mysteries of life, that end and begin are one and the same thing, as they must be if life is to continue swinging around its endless cycles. The mighty symbolism of the seed will be the theme of the next alleviation, which is the ark and the deluge. So that's the conclusion of this particular work that Alvin did years ago. Um, I happened to see his work somewhere last week, and it struck me that simply as I would like to look more into this. And a very bright mind. Obviously, he was not, hopefully not, brought up in a church that may have, and then began to see what was going on. Again, this is Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Kuhn, and he was a philosopher in the past. Um, I'm thinking this was during the 1930s or so. I don't remember. Um, so anyway, I just thought I'd share this with you. That's the time the book was written. What it says here is what his time was on this time was 1947. I don't know if I said that at first. So again, this was the Tree of Knowledge by Alvin Boyd Kuhn. I suggest that you look into this if you're looking for truth. Thank you for being here. It's a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. And so my whole point simply tonight was just to get this read. I didn't realize it was an hour and 40 minutes. I read this whole thing. The truth shall set you free. This is what this is about. This is the truth, what he was sharing. It's not what you're being told by preachers. No churches are teaching truth, folks. I'm sorry to tell you that. And you're lost. And that God is not the evil one either. So, yeah, I had someone comment here. Let's see, looks like S-Nora. There was no slaves in Egypt, nor Egyptian kings never called themselves pharaohs. Students is the title that was given to them, translated to the meaning of authority or ruler. Well, thank you for sharing. I don't know how long that was. I don't know. That was at 5:01, so that's over an hour ago. Anyway, the whole idea again was to share this. This is just brilliant information for those that have ears to hear and eyes to see, but only for those who have the heart to receive. It's for those who want truth. That's all it's for. It's not going to be for those who don't. It will pass you by. That's just true. You must have a desire for deeper things. If not, you'll never find it. So that's the truth. It's just as clear as it means. I'm not trying to be hard. That's not the whole idea. But I'm not going to lie to anybody. It's the truth. So anyway, appreciate you being here. And again, thanks for listening. You take care. Talk to you later.